In March of 2022, Risk of Rain received its first paid DLC expansion, Survivors of the Void. The expansion introduced new items, new survivors, and new stages to the game, the logbook entries of which further develop parts of the history of Petrichor V that we're already familiar with. Things like the betrayal, humanity's reaction to the contact light's disappearance, and where some of the denizens of the planet originally came from. But there's also logbook entries that shed more light on a plane of existence that has been veiled in mystery ever since it was introduced: the Void. Now that the curtain has been pulled back a bit on this strange place, let's gather all of the information about the Void together and see if we can understand it, the creatures that call it home, what those creatures hoped to do with Petrichor V, and by extension the universe, and their ultimate fate. The universe is wide, expansive, and infinite, with stars and planets and just space expanding out in every direction. However, despite this seemingly limitless space, there is a boundary to the universe, though not in the traditional sense. As one explores the universe, they might come upon a strange glowing portal and step through it, or perhaps receive some instructions from a disembodied voice and follow them with curiosity. Or maybe even come across an alien creature that attacks them with an unknown power. Whatever the case, once one of these events occur, the traveler could find themselves across the boundary of the universe and in another plane of existence. One of these planes is a realm known as the Void. The vast sky of this place is a sight to behold, with a soft, pale, violet light giving way to a dark, bottomless abyss. That is, if one is able to perceive it. Not only is it difficult to discern thanks to its infinite nature, most of the time it's obscured by a dense fog that permeates through the entire plane. In addition to clouding the view, this fog also chokes those that find themselves here, to the point of death if they don't find a reprieve from this foul miasma. With this oppressive environment, where even the air itself is hostile, it's hard to believe that life could emerge here. But as the saying goes, life finds a way, and here in the depths of the Void are creatures that call the plane home, and they are just as hostile as their environment. Take, for instance, the creatures called void barnacles, which emerge from the ground in swarms and rain, homing ink bullets at anything they see. Or the small critters named void infestors that use their tiny size, combined with their quick movement, to close the distance to their target, whereupon they attach themselves to it and, using some unexplained power, take control of it, bending it to their will. The victim completely loses themselves to the infestor, and death is the only way for them to be set free of its influence. However, the end of the possessed is not the end of the infestor, as the creature will launch off of a killed host upon its death to search for a new one. While each of these life forms are incredibly dangerous, they're actually some of the weaker ones that live in the Void, staying more towards the shallower or lighter end of the realm. As one moves deeper into the Void, deeper into the darkness and the miasma, they will find more life forms. But due to the harsher conditions these beings must survive in, they take on a larger, more monstrous appearance, and wield greater power. There are the Void Jailers, who can fire explosives from one of their arms that can restrict the movement of any creature caught in its blast. And there are Void Devastators, who, true to their name, can bombard their targets with bombs and missiles, blasting them from existence. The strength and ruin of the Devastator is even theorized to have influenced some of the mythological legends of eras past. And something particularly frightening about the Devastator is that it's not even one of the most powerful beings from the Void, as the depth of the abyss is infinite. One can always go deeper, meaning there are always more and more powerful creatures lurking in its darkness. Ones that have been growing in strength and hunger for so long, they've started to harness powers that can make them gods. And apparently, one of these diviners of the deep appears to have taken an interest in the universe. A monster of the deep void, the Voidling, a gigantic beast with a huge, piercing eye that walks upon 6 spider-like legs, has been making trips to the universe and gathering information about it, using its spectacular power to render any life forms it comes across completely helpless, as it gazes into their minds and commands them to provide it what it seeks. Of course, trying to gather all of the information of the universe by yourself isn't a very efficient or even possible thing to do, so the Voidling has recruited helpers to assist in achieving its goal. It has a legion of creatures named Void Reavers at its command, which it sends to perform the very same task, using similar abilities, although to a lesser extent, to do so. However, these Void Reavers also have an additional job assigned to them. They must also bring things back to the Void. Using an otherworldly ability, the Void Reavers can capture living and non-living things from the universe and detain them, a process that sequences the atoms of the object and crystallizes them. Once compressed in this way, the object is then sent to the Void, where it is stored in specialized containers called cells, and kept as an archive or record of information. Obviously, any living thing that is sent back to the Void is in danger of dying to the fog of the plane. But the Reavers and Voidling have figured out a way of using the fog to stabilize the cells, thereby allowing them to become habitable for the creatures stored inside. They've even learned to use the fog to create totems named Void Cradles to provide the prisoners with sustenance to continue their existence. Once a being is stored in a cell, it is questioned and prodded by the Void Reavers, and even the Voidling itself, who are trying to extract as much information as possible from their prisoner. This interrogation can take various forms, like forcible penetration of the mind, where the memories of the prisoner are scoured to be archived. But the most common is running the prisoner through a simulation and recording their behavior. To the prisoner, the simulation is a near perfect rendition of their reality, and they go through it as they normally would. But upon their death in that reality, they are reset to the beginning of the simulation and forced to go through it again so their new reactions can be recorded. Everything the prisoners see and experience in the simulation is completely under the control of the Void creatures. Even when they think they've killed their captors and escaped from their prison to live a happy life away from the Void, they'll find that they're still in a simulation when they reach the end of it. These dozens or hundreds or millions of lives they're forced to live are torture for the prisoners. And eventually, they'll reach a point where they just want it to stop, where they want their existence to end. But an end never comes. As they suffer their eternal torment, where time becomes imperceptible, where memories are swallowed up by the gloom, they'll begin to feel something creep into their thoughts and into their bodies. The darkness of the abyss will begin to corrupt them, and although they may struggle against the transformation they are forced to undergo, the result is inevitable. They will morph into a fiend of the Void. Yet, even though they are now touched by the Void, they will still remain a prisoner of the Void creatures, and are fated to be one forever. It's not currently known exactly why the Voidling is gathering all this information from the universe. Perhaps it wants to have a catalog of all its information so that at the end of time, when the universe is no more, it can have a record of what existed there. Maybe, in fear that one day a war between the planes could erupt, it's analyzing as much as it can so that it can prepare itself for any opponent that would stand against it. Maybe it just likes to use its godlike powers of the void to entertain itself and see other creatures suffer. But what is known is that the Void Reavers have succeeded in taking many things from the universe. Creatures, weapons, scientists, and automatons. They've even been able to detain whole planets and moons, which are kept in a special planetarium deep in the void, where they are watched over by the Voidling itself. Nothing has been able to stem the tide of their conquest. Nothing except for the crystalline blade of the Guardian of Petrichor V. When the Void Reavers came upon Petrichor V, they were repelled by Providence, who had made a vow to guard all those that came under his protection on the planet. And try as they might, the Reavers were unable to overcome this Guardian, which came as a shock to them as they had been able to claim everything else they'd set their sights on in the universe thus far. With the bulwark of the weak protecting the planet, the Reavers had no choice but to stop their attempts of detainment and wait for the right opportunity to strike. Eventually, the moment they'd been waiting for finally came, when human beings from the solar system crashed upon Petrichor V and killed its guardian, opening up the planet for the Reavers. However, they decided to hold off on making any immediate moves towards the planet, likely because Mithrix, the brother of Providence, was still alive, and although he was on the moon of Petrichor V, he was likely to return to the planet sometime soon, and could likely repel their attack just as easily as his brother had. So again, they decided to wait and watch. Their patience paid off, as sometime later, another group of humans arrived on Petrichor V, and this group traveled to Commencement and killed Mithrix, meaning that now, nothing stood a chance at stopping them. The Void Reavers made their move, immediately warping to Commencement and quickly succeeded in detaining the moon. They then turned their eyes to their long-withheld prize and began the process of capturing the planet by seeding its surface with void influence to ready it for detainment, a process that also corrupted the UES cargo littered on the surface, and detaining and infesting the creatures that called the planet home to catalog them. However, something they hadn't considered or were unconcerned with was that this process also opened them up to the very people that had enabled them to start it. People that they underestimated. Very soon, human beings began making their way into the void, breaking open the cells and releasing the prisoners and weapons stored within. And at the same time, something else that they detained began to shake the bars of its cell and break out, joining with the humans and giving them an inside edge to their attacks. During one of these raids into the void fields, a group of 1 to 4 humans comes upon a portal that takes them to a cell further within the abyss than any previous excursion had taken them. Within this cell, they find 4 beacons that, when activated, open another portal to the deep void. When they step through this, they find themselves in the planetarium of the void. After taking in the view for a moment, they descend down to a platform where the Voidling, in all of its splendor, appears. Once it spots the intruders that have made their way into its domain, it attacks them, releasing dozens of bombs that home into their target, and firing a huge laser from its eye that it sweeps across the entire arena. However, just like Mithrix and Providence, the Voidling underestimates the power of the small creature in front of it. Using the power of the weapons they've collected, the operatives defeat the monstrosity, but before it's killed, it opens up a tear in the void and dives deeper into the abyss. The operatives are forced to give chase, and upon finding it again, have the same thing happen. It's not until the 3rd time that they defeat the creature that the Voidling is finally destroyed, collapsing into a dark implosion like all of the other creatures under its control. With the extraplanar threat finally conquered, The operatives make their way to a portal that is opened up close by and ready themselves to leave. However, although they are a survivor of the Void, they are not as they were before they stepped within the plane. After all, once one sees the monsters that dwell deep in the dark of the abyss, all roads taken only lead deeper within. Inevitably, the Void will corrupt them. But what form that will take remains to be seen, as the survivors step through the portal and suffer an unknown fate, bringing an end to the current lore of the Void of Risk of Rain 2. Although that's everything we know so far, there are still some questions that could be answered. Why were the creatures of the Void archiving all the information from the universe? Who is it that will judge the detained survivors at the end of time? And what does that mean? Did we actually kill the Voidling? Or were we only in a simulation controlled by it? All intriguing questions. There's also a cut ending to the DLC that suggests that Hopoo Games are still working on what exactly they want the Void to be, or didn't have enough time to get everything for the DLC finished in time for launch. So I'm sure as more content is developed and released for the game, we'll get even more information that will establish just what the Void is. We'll just have to patiently wait for that day to come. Now, I'm sure there's something I missed in summarizing the information of the Void, so if you've got something you'd like to share, feel free to. I'd be happy to hear from you. Likewise, if you have any questions, feel free to ask and I'll do my best to answer them. But that's it for this one. So, thank you for watching and see you later.